Hi, folks. Welcome to this event. I'm Will Robin, and I'm very excited to be hosting a conversation on behalf of the 92nd Street Y with the amazing musician Tania León. Tania has had an incredible career as a composer, conductor, and cultural activist that we'll be learning about more over the course of this evening, from being the founding music director of the Dance Theater of Harlem to running an important and pioneering kind of community outreach series with the Brooklyn Philharmonic, to most recently, just last month, winning the 2021 Pulitzer Prize in music just last month. I'm a musicologist and writer, and a few years ago, I had the honor of writing a little bit about researching and working on a book, which is over there, where I got the opportunity to interview Tania. And I knew after that conversation that I wanted to spend more time getting to know her and her music. And so right before lockdown, I don't know if you remember, in January 2020, Tania, we met in New York and spoke for a while because the New York Philharmonic had commissioned this big new piece from you, Stride, which is what won the Pulitzer, and is about the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. And so I got the opportunity to write a little bit about you for the New York Times. And when you won the Pulitzer, I said, I really want to talk more with you. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Hello, Tania.
Hi.
So perhaps we could get started with the Pulitzer and Stride. Where were you when you found out that you won this major award?
Well, this was happening while I was at my dentist.
Oh,
Yes, and my phone was completely off because, that is one of the requirements when you're in that office. And then I came home and started preparing a little bit of a lunch and remember that my telephone was off. So I actually turned the telephone on and I found these big congratulations from Trudy Shan and Franco Terry.
wow.
So I called them and I said, congratulations about what? And then, of course, they told me and I just had to sit down. I
Wow.
didn't even know that the announcement was being made that day. I had no idea I was a candidate. And then, I started crying. That's it.
Amazing.
That's it.
Wow. Yeah. It's funny, they do the Pulitzers now, they do a live stream broadcast that I kind of tune into every few years, and I get all excited to tweet out the music winner when it happens. And I
Yeah.
had a running bet with friends that your piece was going to win. So there wasn't any money on the wager, but I was
Really?
happy to be right.
Oh my God.
What does it mean for you, kind of, in the context of your career, but also in context of what the Pulitzer means to get this major
Well,
achievement?
the thing is that everything in my life have been an incredible surprise. Um, I have no idea. Maybe, some people say it's destiny. Some people say it's being at the right place at the right time. And it had been like that from the very beginning, something that is very puzzling to me. And this is what I actually felt when I heard the news. Here comes another surprise,
Wow.
something that I was not aware that it was happening
Yeah.
because I didn't know that the announcements were being made. And everything have been, I feel blessed because really, it doesn't matter. Something very not so nice may be happening in my life, and then all of a sudden something spectacular comes in, and it's this ping pong that
Mm,
I sometimes I have to make big adjustments
mm,
in order to enjoy the moments that are not so great and really go on stride.
yeah.
And then the moments that are incredibly great, and sometimes is the dichotomy that I would like to share them with people that are no longer here or people
Right.
that might be very distant from me,
Yeah.
geographically speaking. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that maybe invites an opportunity to talk a little bit about kind of the genesis of Stride and what this piece is about. So the New York Philharmonic commissioned this as part of Project 19, right? Which is this,
Yes.
I guess, 19 different commissions, each of which were meant to celebrate the centenary of the 19th Amendment and women's suffrage. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about when you were approached for this piece, how you kind of came up with the idea for it?
Well, honestly, I didn't know that much about that amendment. The commission is the one that made me research,
Mm,
which is something that I do usually. Every time that I want to do something, I research tremendously about that something. And I researched and researched about Susan B. Anthony, her life. I virtually went to her house.
Oh, wow.
And I read her proclamation. I understood, the setbacks that she had and how nobody would make her stop. She really focused into what she wanted to achieve. And then all of the women that really, formed that force with her.
Right.
And that is something that was very, 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 very moving to me, because I've seen people like that. I was fortunate to. It reminded me a little bit of my grandmother. That kind of people that you cannot understand how much force do they have as far as achieving what they want to achieve.
Wow.
And that is actually what compelled me to think about those images, that we're actually syncretizing.
Your grandmother and Susan B. Anthony.
And Susan B. Anthony, my grandmother, my mother, the women of my family that were so resilient, and that resilience that I actually read and witnessed on some of the clips that are of Susan B. Anthony, that was tremendous for me. Yeah.
What was, tell me a little bit more about your grandmother. Like, what was it about her that struck you as so kind of resilient and
well, my grandmother, the reason what I began my life in music was precisely because of her resilience. She took me to a conservatory when I was 4.
Wow.
Because she sort of like saw that I was really, really, really very attracted to music. And I would play with the radio. I don't know if the radio was a newcomer in my home, but the thing is that I was by the radio all the time, shifting the stations. And every time that I would hear, this is what I have been told, every time that I would hear a certain kind of music, I would leave the radio and start dancing to the rhythm of that music.
Wow.
As though I knew or somebody told me, where the rhythm was. And sometimes if I would sing exactly the notes that were they, I would remember what the phrase was. And so that's, I don't know, she got the idea and she took me to a conservatory. And the teachers there said, she's too young. She's not in kindergarten. We cannot start her. Wow. And I don't know, I think that my grandmother drove them crazy. I think that she would go there
persistent
every week, insisting and insisting. And the last one that they told her is that, how is she going to learn the theory? She doesn't even read. And my grandmother said, don't worry about it. She will know.
Wow.
So she made me memorize the answers of the questions that I was going to.
Because you couldn't read yet, but you could. Wow.
But apparently I memorized this thing. So I went back to the conservatory. They would ask me the question, and there I was like a papagayo, blah, blah, blah. So that's the beginning of the story.
That's amazing. Well, I want to come back more to your kind of musical life and journey, but to kind of stick with Stride a little bit longer. So you have these twin images of your grandmother and Susan B. Anthony. How did that kind of shape the actual piece itself, the kind of musical language?
Well, it's interesting because I read the description, that they gave at the Pulitzer with a statement, and it says that the piece is full of surprises. The thing is that this is interesting because writing the piece, I was going through a lot of emotional moments, really very emotional moments. And one moment that I remember, it happens to me. I was writing, and all of a sudden I heard this zoom, and I it gave me the image of like people marching or people, going forward with something, but it didn't have anything to do with people in uniform or anything like that. It was just like people, you see. And maybe it was the images that I perceive or receive upon my arrival in the States, which is the first time that I saw the marches of Martin Luther King.
Oh, right. Yeah.
On television. Something that I was not aware of. because I've never been so involved into any kind of political anything,
Yeah.
And but I saw that, and that gave me a tremendous impression. And I
Mhm.
think that that is what I connected with. And I decided to, this is another thing that I might be writing. I might have a tremendous plan, structure, everything that I want to do, harmonically speaking. And then there's another part of me that I trust very much is my gut.
Right.
So this was my gut telling me this is what's going on here. And
This forward motion.
exactly. And that is exactly what I include in the piece. In that is one of the surprises
Hmm. Hmm.
because it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you have this force that is advancing and advancing and advancing. And another thing in the piece had to do with my encounter with jazz, which is something that I really encountered here, by listening to the first experience was the recordings of Art Tatum.
Right.
And of course, I mean, Louis Armstrong and Miles, and I adore trumpets. I have a thing for trumpets. I don't know why. And so therefore, I mean, I actually, that metaphoric sound
Mm.
of the growling, you see, the growling of
Kind of
Armstrong,
jazz brass. Yeah.
I'm using a plunger. So I use the plunger with the horns.
Mm. Oh wow. Okay.
Right. So that is actually some gestures that come from that genre of music, which I respect tremendously. So I included all of that. It's like a collision of moments, that pass by. It's like the radio.
Yeah.
You
This kind
know,
of like all different
that,
kaleidoscope
that
of something.
exactly, yeah. And then
Yeah.
I understand that that is attributed to the surprises.
Right.
And of course, my music sometimes, there's a lot of rhythm because I mean, the culture, my primary culture was very rhythmical and is very rhythmical. And then, so therefore, sometimes, um, you know, there is comments about the rhythms that I invent
Mm.
and that have that also motoric type of,
Yeah.
and it has to do perhaps with the Caribbean or America Latina, So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Well, we've kind of queued up a lot now, and so it might be a good idea to actually hear a little bit of the piece. So we have, I think, the first 3 or so minutes. The New York Philharmonic was generous enough to share
Uh-huh.
video recording of the premiere. Is there anything you want to say about the opening of the piece before we listen to a little bit of it?
Well, the opening of the piece is sort of like foggy. I mean, you don't really know. It's sort of like opening a book or opening
Mm.
something. Uh, it's again, I mean, without expectation. It's that kind of landscape of sound,
Right.
with no definition, and you don't know where it's going.
Yeah.
And that is where the trumpets appear for the first.
Right. That's brass heavy in the
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah. Like an announcement, but it's
Mm.
not the kind of announcement that we are used to. It's an announcement that has to do with so many things happen in my mind
Mm.
when I was doing this, and I loved my first encounter with New Orleans. And I don't know, but I did that with the trumpets, and I like to do it in like an echo type of situation.
Right. Okay.
You see, and that is the opening of the piece.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Let's listen. If you could
Yeah.
cue that up. Wow. Well, that's just a tease, really. I think you can still access the full performance on the New York Philharmonic's their like plus membership program. I watched it there a few weeks ago, but I encourage you to check out the rest of the performance if you're listening. So yeah, wow, it's very exciting piece. And you mentioned a little bit about your very early musical experiences, and you also talked about kind of when you first were in New York in the late 1960s. And I just wanted to kind of maybe pick up with that of you ended up in New York, where you still are, and but that was not your kind of original destination as a musician when you decided you wanted to be, I guess, early on it was probably a pianist, right? Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about how you ended up in the United States and where you had originally intended on going, and what you kind of saw your path being as a musician?
Mhm. And due to a postcard that I received from a teacher of mine that was a clavicinbalist, he
Mm,
went to Paris to give a recital. And he sent me the Eiffel Tower card telling me that he was bringing me new works. He was the one that introduced me to contemporary music.
mm,
And, so I mean, a postcard saying, hello, I'm bringing you new works. Say hello to your grandmother and your mother. And then I don't know what happened to me, but I received that card and I went to my family and said, you know what? This is where I'm going to live.
how
And I'm
old were you?
9 years old.
9 years old. Wow.
I told my family, I'm going to live in Paris. This is the place where I'm going to live. And since then, it was totally obsessive. For me, I don't know what kind of connection did I make. And I had the card with me. I still look at the card and say,
Wow.
what was that? And I placed the card next to my bed in the wall. And it was, I mean, the Eiffel Tower and Elvis Presley, the two of them. And that was my intention when I left Cuba, that I was going to actually go to the conservatoire and study there. Besides that, my training was very French oriented, with a
Mm,
tremendous amount of solfege from day one. And I knew that Nadia Boulanger was there, and that she
great.
was actually into the solfege.
Mm,
So I thought that I was that was a given for me. And also, I planned to have a big career as a pianist. And by the time I left Havana, I have won 3 competitions already as a pianist.
wow.
And that's how I arrived. Never, never in my wildest imagination, I thought I was going to be a composer and be writing for symphonic orchestras or
Wow.
anything like that. No.
And so you leave for the United States with the intent to go to Paris, and what happens?
Well, I had to stay here. There was a lot of tension between my country of origin and the country, that end up adopting me in a way,
Mm,
because I have been here since then. And then there was a lot of tensions, and I realized that at that moment I could not return, and I didn't know how to tell my family,
wow.
that I was in big trouble. And I got really, really very, very frightened. It was a very frightening. I think that the most frightening moment of my life, and
In
that is
the
when
States in the late 60s, you don't speak English at that point, is
I
that
know I
right?
didn't speak
Yeah.
English, and I didn't know, and I couldn't. I mean, my intention was to be here for a couple of years or something like that to actually get some income and then continue, because I had no income either. And so the thing is that I was told that I had to be here for at least 5 years in order to get a passport and then start traveling
Mm,
like anybody else. And then I decided the third day of being in Miami, I decided to continue to to New York. And I
wow.
had some friends here, and I stay with two great friends, Sarita and Fernando. They were a couple, and they were working in a factory. But they said, "Come on over. We have a sofa."
Great.
And that's exactly what happened. I boarded a plane. I was given the trip by the Catholic Church. They gave me a ticket, a one-way ticket, and I landed in New York.
Wow. And so how did landing in New York, knowing just two people, end up going from there to being a founding member of the Dance Theater of Harlem and their founding music director as well?
Oh, I mean, it's again, surprise, surprise, surprise.
Surprise. Yeah.
Um, the I met a woman in an organization called the American Council for the Immigrants in the Profession,
Mm.
which is an organization that Sarita and I look up in the yellow books, the
Wow.
telephone yellow books.
Yeah.
We were looking for what could help me. And then we saw that title, and I went there. And they were close to the United Nations. And the woman that was there interviewed me, and I told her I was a pianist. And she said, there's a piano there. Why don't you play something? And of course, I mean, my chops were unbelievable. I really, really could play. And I don't know if I played, Chopin Ballade No. 4 or the symphonic etudes, some of the symphonic etudes or something like that.
Hard stuff.
And when I finished, she said, I'm going to get you a scholarship. It was just like that, the day I met this woman. And then she facilitated for me a studio with a piano for me to actually prepare myself.
Wow.
And I remember the studio was on 72nd Street and Riverside. Because when I drive by there, I remember it's one of those buildings. Don't ask me which one, but it's one. Yeah. And then she took me to a place called the New York College of Music, which was on 85th Street between Lexington and Park Avenue. And I went there, and there was a jury that listened to me and things like that. And they said to wait for about 20 minutes. And then when they came out, they said, you have a scholarship. It was just like that. Strange.
Yeah. Well, I imagine your piano playing has something.
No, it was figures. I know. So therefore, from there, there was a liaison with the New York Philharmonic, and they sent me to immerse myself in English because I needed to, in order to validate my degrees.
I see.
I had to learn English, and it was no longer do re mi fa sol la si. It was A B C D E F G. It was such a different situation for me, and that's when being at NYU, learning English and starting to validate my degree as a pianist. That is when a classmate told me that she was ill, and if I could replace her. Because she played lessons, ballet lessons in a school in Harlem. And when she told me Harlem, I went just really, Harlem in the movies.
You hadn't been yet.
No, I haven't put two together yet. And then that's the my first trip to Harlem.
Wow.
I went to this school, which happened to be the Harlem School of the Arts. And I remember meeting the founder, which was Dorothy Maynard. I didn't know that she was a famous singer. I didn't know anybody,
to
tell you the truth. And that day was the day that my fate completely changed. First time I take this trip to Harlem to replace my friend. I'm replacing my friend. Between lessons or between classes, I stay with the piano by myself. I didn't have a piano, so this was, a tremendous situation for me.
Yeah.
Besides that, I couldn't speak English. And so I was playing there, and that is the moment, in one of those moments, is that the door opened and this man went by. And it caught my attention because, the way that he walked, the way that he looked, the way that something about his demeanor was something that it was striking, And then, but yeah, he disappeared in the other door, and I said, okay. And about two or three lessons after, I was in the same situation, playing by myself, and the door opened, and there was this man again. So I thought that he was going to actually walk by and disappear at the other door, but he didn't. He
Hmm.
did come, to me, and I told him I speak English, you know, and it didn't matter. He started laughing and asked me my name, and and he started saying the words that he knew in Spanish and things like that. And he motioned to a number for me to call me. So I gave him the number, and about 2 weeks after, I got somebody speaking Spanish telling me to go to the same place.
Hmm.
So I went to the same place because he really mentioned this, so I knew that it had to do with piano.
Yeah.
And when I got there, we were in a room. It was him with a stick, and then there was a bar in the middle of the room, and four female dancers. And those dancers, one of them was Virginia Johnson, which nowadays is the artistic director of Dance Theater of Harlem.
Yeah.
Lydia Barca, Sheila Rohan, and Patsy Ricketts, which was from Jamaica. So those four dancers, him, then I found out that his name was Arthur Mitchell,
Yeah.
and then myself. And that was the first lesson of what became the Dance Theater of Harlem.
Yeah. It's an incredible story. I mean,
Strange.
so what were you playing? What did you play at that lesson?
That's another thing, since he had me playing by myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I was not playing with books or anything like that, he said, don't play with the books.
You were improvising?
I do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And then he told me to follow him. So I started following him.
So you're just making it up on the go, responding to the dance.
Yeah. I gave the books back to my friend.
Mhm.
I didn't need the books. Yeah.
Wow. And so how did that, that's being the founding music director, I guess, is just being in that space and playing with those incredible dancers.
At first I didn't know what the whole thing was.
Yeah.
Because, he said he had a project in mind, but at that time it had no name.
Mm.
No. And then these big figures, which I found out that they were big figures, start coming in. To help or to talk to all of us, and he kept recruiting people from all over.
Like Balanchine and.
Amazing, yes. And then we started getting sort of like a history of many trials and tribulations. And these people, one of the first people that came was Cicely Tyson,
Wow.
which was very close to him.
Mm.
And for encouragement, to all of us, he started bringing all of these different stars. And we had actually talks with Leontine Price. And, one of my pieces, after I wrote about the second, third ballet, the narrator was Marian Anderson. And then, there was Harry Belafonte. There was actually all these incredible people. Lena Horne.
Wow.
They all came to sort of encourage us with the project, and they were his friends. And I didn't really know who he was until I went to Lincoln Center. He gave me a ticket. And I went there and I saw him on stage dancing.
He just seems like this kind of random nice guy who's giving you an opportunity, and then suddenly he's performing New York City Ballet.
So I read the program, and that's when I found out also about Balanchine. That's when I found out that the ballets that he danced were written by Stravinsky, and Stravinsky was alive and kicking right here in New York.
And one of your heroes.
It blew me away completely. I said, "What, Stravinsky?" Yes.
Did you ever meet Stravinsky?
No. No. Too bad.
Yeah.
Too bad, because now it was during the days of our formation. You see.
Yeah.
But I would have.
Yeah.
Stravinsky died in 1971.
Yeah. So composing and conducting really both came for you out of Dance Theater of Harlem, right? Like, how did you really move from improvising on the piano to composing music for them? And how did you also move to actually conduct?
Well, that was an initiative of Arthur. one day, we would do these spectacular lessons. I really would be inspired by his movement and what he was creating for the lessons or the classes. And one day he said, "Why don't you write a piece? I'm going to do a choreography." It was just like that. And to tell you the truth, he became sort of like a mentor, a brother, a member of my family. So he told me something like that, and I took it seriously. And I went to the library, I took theory books, harmony books, all kind of things. And that's how I wrote that piece without really going to NYU and telling at NYU I'm going to shift my major.
Mm.
And I shifted the major after I saw the first performance of Tones, which is a piece, dedicated to my grandmother, because also everything happened simultaneously. Stravinsky died in 1971 in April, and the years after my grandmother died too.
Wow.
So it was a big thing for me. And so the first ballet is dedicated to my grandmother.
Mm.
And so when I saw the ballet and the lights, the dancers, I recorded. The piano part is recorded by me, and all these musicians that we put together to become the mix ensemble. That's when I say I better study composition.
Yeah.
And I went to NYU, and then they told me to study with a gentleman called Vladimir Padua, and Padua transferred me to Ursula Mamlock.
Wow. Yeah.
Which was my only teacher.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to continue asking about that, but I just remembered that folks, if you are curious about anything, feel free to put a question in the chat, either on YouTube or on the 192nd Street Y page, if you have any questions for Tania, and we'll get to them in the last 10 or so minutes of our talk. I just want to put a quick plug in for that. So, you're composing and you're then conducting, and there's this kind of shift that happens in your music in the late 1970s and early 80s that has to do with when you returned to Havana for the first time since you left in the 60s. Can you talk a little bit about what happened when you go back to see your family in 1979?
Oh my God, that was so amazing. So amazing. That's another moment, in my, I don't know, in my library of moments, which was spectacular. I've never seen my father with white hair. My mother, as usual, she was very skinny. But it was a very tremendous for me because I went back and my grandmother was not there.
Yeah.
So, and then there was these little ones that I knew were born in the distance. And the only one that I remember the most, of course, I went directly to the girl, she was so nice, my niece. And then the little one, he was about 3 years old, something like that, or approaching 4. And he said to my family that I spoke phony, because apparently my Spanish was already different.
Wow.
Or the syntax of my Spanish was different. And that's the only thing that I always remember.
Yeah.
She said, she talks phony. In Spanish, of course.
Yeah.
It's like, where is it coming from?
That kind of relates, though, to the conversation, right, that you have with your father about your music when you're there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, of course, I brought to my family, programs from Dance Theater of Harlem, some of my recordings. And at that time, there were cassettes, and I play all this music and everything. And they were really so surprised to see all the things that I have done. And I was telling them about all of this that I have told you right now. And then actually after, it's almost at the moment where I'm leaving that my father, we walk around the neighborhood, we listen to some drumming, and then my father said that my music was very interesting, But I mean, he hit me in such a way that I don't know, but it made me think, because he said, "Your music is very interesting, but where are you in your music?" I had no idea what he meant. You know, and uh, and then month after, my father died,
Wow.
and we never discussed that. So I mean, that's another thing that it became like a gut feeling for me. And the gut feeling came out of a piece called Four Pieces for Cello. And the second movement is a lento doloroso. I mean, it's like a prayer to him because of his passing. And then the third movement is the first time that I title a piece Tumbao. And Tumbao had to do with the sway the person has when they walk.
Mm.
And I remember seeing my father, from the back, the way that he walked. And that is actually what gave me the rhythmical cells to create something with the cello, where the cello becomes a percussion instrument
Right.
while it's playing, and then intertwined. It's one of the claves de son from Cuba, which is a rhythmical pattern intertwined in all of that. And that is the third movement of that piece, and then the fourth movement goes back to very contemporary, very very
Mm. Mm.
yeah.
But this idea of clave rhythms in your music, of beginning to incorporate the sounds of
Yeah,
Cuban music,
that is my
Afro-Cuban music,
decision. Yes, the
that
decision. Yeah,
and
yeah.
did that feel like you were kind of doing answering that question or that statement of your father's, like you were starting to find yourself in your
I
music
don't
or your
know. That's
culture?
something my intuition.
Mhm.
I mean, because I mean that question was bothering me. It bothered me so much. I would have nightmares, and some of the nightmares had to do with listening to the
Mm.
drums that we were listening to the last time that we were together.
Wow.
And in Cuba, people have a lot of music in them, whether they go to a conservatory or not, and people drum, or you are at home in a table and somebody starts with a little pattern, and everybody start adding up, and all of a sudden you have a polyrhythmic pattern going on. And everybody's having fun. And so I mean there was a house where there was actually a lot of drummings of people that play for Santeria and everything.
Mm.
And my father knocked at the house and told them, my daughter is visiting from the States and she hasn't seen this in a long time. Can we come in? And they allowed us. And I saw these drummers playing there and everything. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, in this period in the, I guess, kind of in the 80s and into the 90s, you begin incorporating all of these different, I guess, aspects of those drums, the sounds of Cuba into your music. One of my favorite pieces from that period is A la Par from 1986. And we can listen to a little bit of the end of the piece. The Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center just did a fantastic live stream performance, and I think you did a discussion with them. And so,
Mhm.
do you want to just talk a little bit about what A la Par is about, and also how you might hear Cuban or Afro-Cuban elements in the final section of this piece, which is for piano and percussion, I should
Yeah,
say.
yeah, 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 yeah. A la par means riding together. It's like the wheels of a train that,
Hmm.
they curve together, they go straight together. And I thought of that for whichever the piano was playing and the percussionist was playing, but not actually the similarity of the notes, but the
Oh, interesting.
similarities of the gestures. You see, that is something that I was very interested in. And one of the things that actually captivated me is that I remember walking on 42nd Street. At the time, there was a lot of toys that people would sell, and they have
Hmm.
them on the floor. And there was a monkey that I saw that was playing. I mean, he had, I think, a cymbal in the head, and he was doing things with. I mean, he
Hmm.
was playing all over the place, all these instruments, and like a trap set and things. And
Wow.
that gave me the idea for the percussionist. Yes, because I wanted the percussionist sort of like to be all over the place with a piece. And of course, I mean, the pianist, as I said, it was mirroring in a way. if you see them playing specifically the third movement, if you see them on stage, you see that they are moving at the same time. Because I mean, the setup on the percussion, it goes gradually from low to high. So if the pianists were doing low to high or low high up,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
the percussion is doing the same gesture, but I mean different instruments, and that is actually what I wanted to challenge myself doing that piece, and the influences, the rhythmical influences specifically in that movement
Mm.
are actually coming from claves that have to do with the claves brought to Cuba by the Africanos. So I wanted to play out with that too. Yes.
Great. Well, let's listen to the final movement, the final kind of chunk of the final movement of A La Par. This is performers from the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center. Wow. Such a great ending. What, I mean, this has kind of come up again and again, but like one of the things I love so much about your music is the juxtaposition of this, it's this spontaneity, but it also always feels so kind of very tightly controlled in that way too. Like how do you, what's your process like? And you talked a little bit about it. You have very kind of intense compositional procedures, maps, but then you have these moments of intuition.
Yes. Well, I before I write a piece, I prepare uh, a lot of sketches, and they are all spontaneous. And it's the music that I hear no matter where.
Mm.
I could be in a subway. I could be in a plane.
Just pops into your head.
I could be sitting in a park. I could be walking around, and then all of a sudden something pop, and I write it down. So by the time I'm going to write a piece, I might have 40, 50, 60 sketches. And I don't do the same thing all the time, but sometimes I just spread them and see how they connect one thing with the other,
Mm.
you know. And many times I start a piece, and that becomes the ending, and the ending becomes the beginning.
Wow.
You know? And everything is like, it's like
You just
magic.
have, is it like just pieces of paper that you're kind of like putting up on a wall or something?
I
It's like,
put them in a wall. I will put them on the floor, on top of the table. Yeah.
sounds very messy.
Not always, you know,
Okay.
but that process have have created some very interesting pieces for me, you know. And out of that also emerges a structure. You see, because I don't like to work with pre-prescribed
Mm.
structures.
Yeah,
Structures. For example, I've never written a sonata, you know, because I mean, a lot of composers have written incredible sonatas,
sure.
you know. So I'm not going to emulate that, and it's not a structure that I may be attracted up to this point. Maybe tomorrow I might change my mind,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I like to create structures,
Mm.
you know. It's like you know, for example, I love Frank Gehry because I mean, you know, there's something that you can find a thread in his architecture the realizations, but his buildings are different. And sometimes I think, what is the structure
Mm.
that makes that building be like this, for example? You see, it's same thing like sculpture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
spontaneous or something. Yeah.
Right. So that is something that I very attracted to,
Mm.
emerging structures that create, you know, or sustain the music that I write.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We don't have too much time left, but we haven't talked about it yet, and I do want to talk a little bit about your kind of advocacy and maybe activism is the right word for it. I don't know. You know, going back to your work with the Brooklyn Philharmonic and their community concerts, now you curate this festival, Composers Now. You've championed, you curated these amazing Latin American music festivals with the American Composers Orchestra. So like, you know, the last decade, but also the last year especially, there have been all these important conversations in classical music happening around issues of diversity and social justice. And I'm just wondering if you can, you know, where you see yourself in those discussions, and how you see your longer you know, career as a musician and activist kind of speaking to them. It's
Mhm.
a big question. So.
Well, I mean, based on the work that I have achieved as an activist, I mean, I have been part of the conversation of diversity since day one.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you know, the founding of the Dance Theater of Harlem wanted to prove that the people of color wanted to dance ballet. You know, so in other words, all these questions that have emerged over years and over centuries, you know, are actually meeting for the first time and spoken directly for the first time now. So I mean, all of the different projects that I have done is a sum total of all of that approach.
Mm.
And for me, it doesn't have anything to do with culture. It doesn't have to do with skin tone. It doesn't have to do with what language you speak. I feel that we are a diverse people, you know, a diverse humanity. There's no two members of our humanity that are similar, you see. So that is diverse. I
Mm.
mean, so that's why I have a tremendous it made me think a great deal, you know, of how we can compartmentalize ourselves like human
Mhm.
beings, you know, by categorizing each other and by actually attaching labels that doesn't have anything to do with the description of what a human being is all about or the soul of that human being.
Mm.
Because this is another thing that also I think a lot about, you know. I mean, I'm not what I look like. You see, there's something inside me that has no image. You
Mm.
cannot touch it. You cannot, you feel it. You see, we might feel the spirit of another person, but the spirit doesn't look like the house that actually the spirit inhabits. So
Great.
that is something that I have been thinking more and more and more and more, and and one of the things that I am very attracted to is seeing a baby and trying to see the spirit of that baby, that just came into the planet.
Mhm. I
And
would go get mine, but I think
yes, I know.
he went to bed about 20 minutes ago.
Oh my God. Yeah. Because I mean, it's fascinating.
Mhm.
I think that human beings are fascinating, and humanity is fascinating. And now that that we have these incredible visionaries going up, in the rocket.
Space, yeah.
I mean, that's a new frontier
Mhm.
in a way that make us realize that, I'm always thinking that we're a planet in the
Mhm.
middle of the universe,
Mhm.
that, the scientists and I mean, the people that know tell us where we are
Mm.
at. But do we know where we are at?
Mm.
You see? And our lives are, in a way, the blink of a mosquito when you actually think what time is all about.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I mean, and those are the things that actually make me think about what to do in the time of living. How much time do I have to do something that I would like to do?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, what is that for you then? I mean, what's next post Pulitzer, post Stride? Like, what are
I
you
have
hoping to
no
achieve?
idea. I have no idea because I mean, told you everything has been a tremendous surprise.
Hmm.
And the fact that, did I know 2 months ago that we were going to have this conversation today,
Sure.
talking about the
Hmm.
Pulitzer Prize? No, I mean, at times I think about it and I say, but how did this happen?
Yeah.
It's something else. Yeah.
I mean, what has the past year, maybe pre-Pulitzer for you been like in terms of, a lot of artists have been, able to do all kinds of new and interesting work during the pandemic, and a lot of artists have not been had the opportunity or not been able to, whether it's childcare or it's just hard to compose in this kind of crazy time. What have you been doing in the last year?
Well, it have been very challenging for me. I mean, specifically writing that piece was very challenging
Yeah.
because I mean, I had a tremendous upheaval in my personal life at the time,
Mm.
and perhaps that also were part of all of that collision of different pieces getting together. Then another thing is that Composers Now, which is an organization that I
Yeah.
founded. Of course, I mean we have the festival, but it's also an organization, and how to make sure that I mean it happens to everybody that has to do with a nonprofit organization. How to make sure that the organization continues, and specifically is an advocacy for composers of all genres of music.
Mm.
Because I believe that there is an audience for any kind of genre, and the composer is a tremendous contributor
Of
to the
course. Yeah.
culture of our society. So I mean that is something that I feel, not so much. I mean, by being a leader. No, I'm a part of that community, and each of us are contributing in a certain way. So that is
Mm.
something that I am very vested into. And then, of course, I mean, trying to stay in touch with my family, which
Yeah.
is in different parts of the world. That have been really something. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you have family now in Cuba. What has it been like for them? What has it been like for you, with everything going on there?
Well, I mean, for me and for all of us, it has been the story of my life because I'm the one that migrated. I went to another part of the world, and sometimes that is not comprehensible for people that don't do that.
Mm.
But for me, no, it hasn't been a challenge to think that I can live in another. If I would have been in Japan, I would have been speaking Japanese by now.
Mm.
You see, because I mean, you go to another culture, you
Yeah.
adopt a lot of things of that culture, you sort of syncretize. I mean, some of yours, some of that the new culture, and you become enlightened in a way. You see, if you don't actually become obsessed about who you are, or where you're coming from, or that I'm speaking to you in English and I arrived speaking Spanish.
Yeah.
You see, so that is something that is very attractive to me. Not to feel that I am rooted in only one thing. So I'm constantly, But the separation have been tough. That's true,
Yeah.
because I mean, who doesn't like to have family members for Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
or for, I mean, so it's something that people that migrate sometimes feel that way, and but this is only one planet,
Yeah.
and we cannot get out of it. So it's a matter of adjusting, and moving from one place to the other, and recognizing that this is the only house that we have. It's planet Earth. Yeah.
I know you said, when I asked what's next, you said always surprises, but surely you're probably composing, or you must have something. Is there anything you can say about what you're working on now, or what might be next? If it's all under the wraps, that's fine. But
No.
Yeah.
Now I'm working for a piece for Yale University.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. It's a piece for trumpets and percussion.
Okay. Trumpets and percussion. That's an interesting ensemble.
Yes, and it's the first time that I am doing something percussion, like percussion line.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like a drumline piece or something?
Exactly.
Oh, wow. That's
On the percussion side.
Okay, on the percussion side.
Yeah.
But it'll be performed in a concert hall.
No, it's gonna be performed outdoors.
Oh, outdoors. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
How many trumpets?
5.
Okay, interesting
5 trumpets.
ensemble.
Yes.
And is there inspiration or a theme or something that informing
No. I mean, those are two forces that I love. Yeah, I love brass, and I told you that I love trumpets.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the trumpets and percussion, but this is the first time that I want to do percussion and percussion line, with the the percussion attached to the body.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. I really, of course, I love percussion lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds fantastic.
Yes.
Well, New Haven folks can look out for that. I think we're just about at time. So thank you so much, Tania, for this really enlightening conversation. I'm really grateful that we could spend the evening together. And thank you to the Y for hosting, and also thank you to the Philharmonic and the Chamber Music Society for letting us use that wonderful musical clips. So thanks all for coming, and have a wonderful evening.
Bye, Will.
Bye.